first question? Who has the first question for one of our guests?
Great.
Let's get it going. And also, sorry, just to say as well, before you ask your question, if you could say your name and your job title, where you're from, that would be great. Give us an idea.
Hi, my name is John Finn. I'm a psychologist, really, from my background. I work for myself. I'm associated with Leeds University. Just an interesting day. The multiple skills we were talking about. Ultimately, learning skills is the job of most of the coaches that most people in this room will be working for. And learning to do that under pressure is something. But it doesn't seem to be very apparent in our coach education system. So, what are your thoughts on that? And how might we move that forward as a sporting body, or whatever you want to call ourselves? How do we get more coaches understanding how to develop good skills under pressure?
I think several of the speakers have alluded to, if it's fair, is Marco still here? Oh, were you me? Oh, hello, buddy. How are you? But Marco was alluding to there are gaps in knowledge. I think sometimes alarming gaps in knowledge for lots of British coaches. And I think if you think there are three sorts of bodies of knowledge that a coach needs. There's the sport-specific knowledge. I think our coaches are pretty good at it. There's an ology knowledge about physiology, biomechanicsology, notational analysisology, psychology that make the differences. I think some of them are still very good at that. And there's a pedagogy knowledge, or sort of andragogy knowledge, if you think of learning adults, skill acquisition. And I think their knowledge is fairly patchy. I think it's good in parts. So for me, were you to start looking at coach education processes, that would be the key way of pushing things forwards. As a personal opinion, we will get much less legacy from 2012 than we could have done, because we didn't focus on the main creator of participants and talented participants, i.e. coaches. We focused on whether West Ham could use a stadium or not. We focused on whether, they were wearing the right sort of kit designed by Stella McCartney, but we took our eye off the bloody big ball of developing coaches. And I just don't think we do a good job here. Sorry, someone from Sports Coach UK in, my apologies. I think we do a poor job.
I think there's a lot of crossover here with the military as well. When I'm comparing a coach to what we call an instructor. And the three component parts that we think of a good instructor, and you could sort of map it across to a coach, is knowledge, as we've already said, skills, and attitude. Well, from our perspective, you can teach anybody, or you can give anybody knowledge, skills you can develop, but clearly it's the attitude and the environment within which the training is set is critical. So the way we attack it, notwithstanding what the coach deficiencies are, is we try to fill on our courses or give the instructor the knowledge, skills and attitude to deliver that training. So that's the way we develop our instructor training. If you map it over to coaches, it's the same principle.
And if I can just as a follow-up, a competency-based model of evaluating coaches is, to my mind, entirely inappropriate once you get past level 1, 2. It's great for hairdressers, isn't that right? Yeah. Sorry. It's great for hairdressers. It's great for bricklayers. It's pish for coaches and teachers, because the level of complexity of the environment, and therefore the levels of shades of greyness to the tasks they must answer, is just so complicated that you need a model of expertise and not a list of they can do that, they can do that, they can do that. It just is death by checklist. And so I think, again, we took a fundamentally wrong philosophical or epistemological step when we locked coach development in this country to MVQs. It was, for me, a decision that was taken by political expedience and not by intellectual consideration or rigour. And again, it's put us in a situation. Now, we need to go at the old Eastern Bloc, where you've got a degree in coaching, and I've employed some of those guys, and they're bloody good. That's a completely different level of knowledge. Marco again was describing, trying to work with a a 65-year-old coach and say, look, mate, you've got to change. Well, I've seen some 65-year-old coaches who are brilliantly adjustable and adaptable, and some 25-year-old coaches who you could shake a stick at and just wouldn't happen. So you're actually looking at a commitment to a mental flexibility in coaches, in instructors, in scientists, in academics, in football managers, and the guys, like your slide said, that are the most adaptable are the guys who come through.
Brett, is there the same situation in America with coaches as Dave is talking about there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's very important that the coaches are, looking at all aspects of the game and trying to incorporate both the specific to the sport, but also thinking about the intangibles, the psychological approach to the game, and I think that's a direction that certainly, we see coaches going in, for sure.
Who has the next question? I'll try the microphone. Who has the next question? Yes.
Steve Hay from Sheffield Hallam University. Mike talked about all the different people that were trying to change the behaviour of, but didn't actually mention performance analysts themselves, who are part of the system. So I just wondered, from your point of view, you've got performance analysts delivering the data, but sometimes you have this feedback loop, which if you're not careful, you get into, where you're delivering the information that you've been asked to deliver, but not really thinking about the things that you're delivering, whether it's any use or not. It sounds like the ECB have kind of got it right from that point of view, but what's your experience of that, where you end up with data collection for data collection's sake?
Joe, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens in all aspects, whether it's physiological. You get swamped in data without actively thinking, well, how's that going to influence trainer behaviour? Environment I've worked in a lot is football, and you see lots of technical and tactical development. You don't see a lot of skill development in a senior player, and that surprises me really. So it's all focused on the team shape rather than still developing. If you've got a young 18, 19, 20-year-old player, there's still lots of skill development there, and I think just throwing physiological or match analysis or any sort of numbers at them isn't always going to solve the problem. It needs to be a little bit more circumspect than that, and often, as I said earlier, interdisciplinary in nature. These things don't exist in a vacuum, so it's very important that we take, and I think we're shared in this, aren't we, Dave, in that opinion, that very much an interdisciplinary approach.
I think you've got to make sure, let me say, what we do in a purely heterosexual manner is our analysts are in bed with the coach. So in other words, the guy that's developing the concept of employment, the tactics, the game plan. So our analysts are actually in bed with him, so they're producing data that it complements the actual game plan and how he sees the game being played. So I think absolutely you've got to get the analyst in bed with the coach, the manager, whoever he's working to, so he's producing data that's in concert with that.
Dave, is there a danger though that there can be data for data's sake?
There's a cracking study that looked at, in this case it was strength and conditioning specialists in rugby league in Australia, and basically the team got better at bench press through the year, and they got worse at handoffs. So they could do that two-handed, but they couldn't do that one-handed. Yeah, and that, for me, there's a number of reasons why that occurs, but one reason it occurs is because you get a bean counter mentality of people who don't understand the performance pie coming in and going, now I've got to assess your contribution, your contribution, your contribution. Yeah, and so what happens is the strength conditioning specialist says, oh, well look, I've done my job, look, they're stronger. Or the nutritionist says, well, I've done my job, they're thinner. Yeah, or as I encountered in going into athletics, I had 80% of my support science resource being spent on the bottom 20% of the athletes, because the scientists were looking for people to work with, and the bottom 20% were looking for any bloody edge they could get. So they made this marriage, and unfortunately the good guys wandered off into distance. So there is a significant risk, yeah, unless you are pretty careful with both your, and this is down to management, ladies and gents, isn't it? It's the way in which we are managed and we are used, and a part of, I think, work as a good, effective sports scientist, support practitioner, is to manage upwards and say, by this shall ye judge me, by this shall ye know me. Yeah? So.
I mean, my comment, I think this goes to the theme of, whenever you have a situation where you have a performance analyst trying to convince a coach on what to do, and you've collected data, you've developed the model. I think you spoke about this, the timing. You need to kind of attack it like a game and have a strategy. Speak in the language that the coach is going to understand. Talk about things that we can all understand. Relate implementation to playing blackjack or playing poker, where hey, what I'm suggesting to you, there's strong evidence that over time, in the long run, after many trials, it's going to work. But just because you try it and one game it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean necessarily you abandoned it. And if you can just show clearly what the advantage is going to be by following whatever it is that you're suggesting, it's showing that this is the lift that you get from what I'm suggesting. It makes it's clear the coach can follow that, and it's ultimately up to the coach, the manager, to decide whether they want to follow it or not. And the best that you can do is just make a clear presentation, but be careful, and because if you blow that chance, if you start speaking in a language the coach doesn't understand, you're going to lose his or her trust, and it's going to end up going against you in the long run. So it's my take on it.
Next question. Nobody got any other questions they'd like to ask the panel? No. No. Yes.
Shaurya from Manchester Business School. I'm a full-time MBA student here, and this is really interesting. It was really interesting to hear all your thoughts about what the data is all about and how to implement the data and how to tell the story of the data that you've collected to the players. One particular thing that caught my attention was from Professor Dave Collins, where he talked about give reduced, delayed, and limited feedback in a timely manner. Is that really practical? You have the data, you analyze it, and you know it will work. But how to pull yourself back and give limited feedback to the players to make things actually work? How practical it is in real situations?
It's absolutely essential. I can think of certain teams that have gone abroad with lots of specialists. Yeah, rugby tours. I won't say be any more specific than that. But you wouldn't have to think very hard. Yeah, where there are so many bloody experts. And they've all got to do their bit with the players. So I checked on this. You had players who had a commitment of 7 hours a day on tour to have input from the defensive specialist, the coaching specialist, the hairdresser, not maybe the hairdresser, but a number of different specialists. And each of these guys had to have their bit because that made them feel good, and it made them. I've contributed to the team. Now, one of the things that I recognise, especially when I've gone to major games like an Olympics or Worlds, is that I don't need to do it. So it's not a problem because we've set it up so the coach can do it, or another athlete can do it, or whatever. And in actual fact, my input may well get in the way. So on the day, how are we going to deliver? There's a message that needs to be delivered, but I don't need to be delivered it. I'm reasonably confident in my manhood that I don't have to do everything. But that's the problem. Because you're there as a specialist, because you've got to justify to the funders, UK Sport, or the board of the club or whatever, that you're doing a job, you have to be seen to do it. And that's detrimental to performance. Make sense? So then when you come to feedback, if you're a performance analyst and you're hired to provide, you want to be seen to be doing something. So you look for things to do. And some of the things that you do are very, very useful. And some of the things you can do are not useful at all. And some of the things you can do are downright bloody dysfunctional. And it's having someone somewhere, and my suggestion is that it's part of the job of being a good analyst, is to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know what to play and know when not to play, yeah, against the sets of outcomes that are developed. So he might say to me as a manager, I want this. And I go, if you want this, I need this. And he might say, but the pitfalls are this. In other words, I am a genuine expert in not just the generation of numbers, but the way in which those numbers are used.
I want to speak, I just want to add to that, just speak a little bit from an athlete's perspective as well. And I think to an extent, all of us can at some point identify ourselves as athletes. I mean, let's take golf for an example. How frustrating is it when you're with a group and you've got everyone trying to give you advice and everyone's got their tips here and there. But the best piece of advice I always get with golf is just, remember three things. When you're up at the tee box, just think of three things. You think of your shoulders, your stance, maybe your hip movement. So can you, when you're dealing with players, just have them think of three things, with an approach into a match. What are three things that you can do better in the next match? You may find several things that you could recommend to a manager, to a player, as to how they can improve, but make it very easy. Just simplify it. You rank what you believe is most important, your top three, and that's what you're going to hit home. Dealing with players and also even with the manager. What are the top items that you believe that can make the most impact? So
if you're working with Tiger Woods, keep it zipped up. Don't let the wife reverse the car, and watch your Twitter account. There you go. There you go.
Dave, just go back to your point there. Who makes the decision on what, if we're going for the less is more approach, who makes the decision on what the pertinent information is? Does the analyst go to the head of the organisation and the manager, present all the data, and the manager, the coach, whoever that person may be, overseeing the whole operation? I want you to present these three bits, or is it the analyst?
I think it's an excellent question, and I don't think there's any one answer. Yeah, I think that you look at, if you're genuinely working in a situation, yeah. So we're part of a support team, and we're not worried about scoring points off each other. Yeah, we're just worried about performance. And you see, I wouldn't want, as a performance director, I wouldn't aggregate performance contribution. I wouldn't say, well, a physiologist did this and the psychologist did that and the analyst did that. I'd say, we're winning, or we ain't doing well, boys. What are we going to do? Sorry, boys is gender free. What are we going to do about it? Yeah, and that's, we're all in it together. Yeah, so I don't need to see you, what are you doing? Yeah, I just need to see we're effective. Yeah, so therefore,
in order to,
yep.
to ensure that effectiveness, whose decision is it?
In order to do that effectiveness, if I'm the head coach, yeah, I've got to know enough about what I should expect from you to be able to make an informed decision. Right. And how can I find that out unless you tell me? Yeah. So therefore you must know, and you must have the capacity to tell me, and I must have the capacity to listen and learn. Yeah? Sure. Fair?
Can I just add, I think the dynamic here is just a contract between the relationships you have. And once you've contracted into the relationship and how you're going to communicate between yourself, then contracts are drawn and there the information is passed. And it's quite often something that's neglected. And the passion and love of the analyst wanting to feed everything is this overkill. And earlier I mentioned some people are prone to paralysis by analysis because they've got just too much going on. So he's contracted up front early before the critical point. Well, it should be a smooth running.
Can I just, I think it's also obvious it's very situation environment specific, and it's much easier in, say, individual sports where you can communicate with the coach and the athlete individually. I think as a sports scientist, someone that's worked as a physiologist for years and years, that the biggest challenge is change of behaviour, particularly in football. And I think when we have data that kind of conforms to what we think it should be telling us, you feel much more empowered and confident to go to the manager. I think sometimes you have situations, rightly or wrongly, where you know the data doesn't seem to fit right with what you feel it should do, and it always brings me back to a quote from Jim Collins, so someone that from Manchester Business School would know, his books on corporate from good to great. And one of the famous lines in that I always remember is, don't ignore the data just because you don't like what it says. Ignore it if you've got other data. And I think it's easy to fall in that trap, and it's also the biggest challenge is getting people to change their behaviour on the basis of your data. And this, different clubs have different cultures, and some sports science teams in football have a great relationship with the manager and they'll change things. And let's be honest, there's other clubs that can have a great sports science team, but it isn't affecting what goes on the training pitch because the manager won't ever use it.
So a question up at the back, yeah.
Just a question for them, based on his experiences with the Olympics. One of the most effective means of feedback, which is on your slide, that I found was where was the self-regulated feedback by the player in terms of generating long-term retention. And I just wondered if you had any examples from the Olympics of where that has been successfully employed or other sports, how that's been managed.
In my experience, when you're at an Olympics, everything is unremittingly positive. Yeah, I've been at the pleasure of working with some really good coaches and athletes, and in warm-up, they look well beaten. And there's no, it is overly late. The horse has not only left the barn, but has moved in with Mrs. Horse and established a home somewhere else. Yeah, to be going at training. Well, maybe you need to just work on and actually taking coaches away from their athletes. Athletes have said, for Christ's sake, take him away from me. Yeah, do something with him to stop him trying to coach me. Yeah, in very technical events when I'm warming up. So it's sex, comedy, and coaching. It's all about timing. Yeah. So therefore, what you do is, when you're in Olympics, it's very, very much final polish. Interestingly, I learned very early going to Olympics that if I said, "Oh, how are you doing?" to an athlete, because I was a psychologist, they'd go, "Oh Christ, do I look all right?" So you've got to be very careful. How's it hanging? Whatever. Whatever. Should I consult my tailor? So you've just got to be careful, very careful of how everything you do, is perceived. Yeah, and that's the bottom line. But in terms of the longer term agenda, I think again it's come out that it's quite hard for us to keep a sort of a weather eye on how things are happening today. It's very easy for me to go, how did the session go today? Well, it went really well because they were there, and by the time they walked out, they were there. Yeah. So most coaches tend towards the use of tools that generate short-term development because in their experience, that's what happens. Analysts can provide fantastic data to say, whoa back, we're working on a long-term thing, yeah? And that's where we're going. And also questioning the assumption that, well, this is where we were last year, so last year we did this, so this year we should do this as well. So those examples, yeah? The bottom line for me, the why question, I'm like that annoying big bloody bird on Sesame Street. The why question is really crucial. Why are you doing what you're doing now? Yeah? What evidence do you have that that's the best way to do it? Yeah? And we'd almost like you play off against each other. You'd want people to think about that. Yeah? And maybe the psychologist is the person who knows most about that process. Maybe he's not, she's not. Yeah? But we should feel happy to be able to challenge each other. Yeah? So long as we don't challenge each other in front of the performers.
Another question, yes.
We've spoken a lot about today the relationship between the coach and the analyst or the sports scientist as a group. Where do you place the actual players in that environment? Shouldn't we empower? How do we empower them as analysts to be part of that process? Because ultimately we sit behind the computers. We don't play the game. So I'd just like to know what your thoughts on that kind of area is, and actually giving them some kind of.
I'll take that. Yeah, I read, I heard about this just through reading an article, but Jurgen Klinsmann's the U.S. national team coach now, and he's really, and I know I think one of the presentations talked about, I think Simon's first presentation talked about, how Klinsmann with the German squad in 2006 employed some unconventional type methods, and he was really committed to performance analysis. And so it's very interesting what he's doing with the U.S. national team right now, and they're doing, all sorts of specialized, kind of similar to the saliva testing, but I think they're doing some blood analysis and really paying a lot of attention to the players and you know, players participating in questionnaires, a lot of things that we've talked about today. But one of the things that stuck out, and it related to your question, was that he would give, I think he gave every player an assignment, I think heading into one of their international matches, to make a video, basically edit a video of the other team's strengths and weaknesses. So basically just take, you know, here's the video from the match, here's how the software works. So you guys learn how to use the software and cut what you believe are the, you know, overall the strengths and weaknesses of your opposition. So that, you know, with the technology this day, it's, you know, if you learn some of these software tools, it doesn't take that long to learn them. And, you know, it's hit or miss with the players. I didn't really get a sense of what the response was from the players. I would imagine that there's probably a fraction that were very supportive, a middle part that was indifferent, and then another part that was a little bit reluctant and some animosity towards being given assignments during their free time. I'm sure if Klinsmann's doing it, there's some other coaches out there, and that's, you know, a possibility. Is how can you now get the players hands-on with some of these analytical tools, because some of them are very user-friendly.
I work in 3 different sports academies, and getting the young guys to do that is an essential part of all the academies I work in. Yeah, because there is no better way for them to get their, get a real, and be able to demonstrate a real conception, of, look, that's what I'm trying to achieve. So for example, a young 15-year-old player being able to say, look, this is me, this is examples of me doing what I think you want me to do. This is examples of me doing areas where you're telling me I need to develop. And that that is so powerful. And then of course, face to cams by that young player saying, over the next 6 weeks I'm going to work on this and this and this. That absolutely takes things to another order of magnitude. And that's performance analysis done by the player, informed and supported by the specialist, that has a massive coaching, psychophysiological effect. It's massively powerful. Yeah, but you're not doing it, but you are, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's, for me, it's perfect. That works beautifully.
Joe, in football, players will obviously buy into it if the manager buys into it, which is why the manager is so crucial. But perhaps in football, maybe more than any other sport, it's a generational thing, perhaps, because there's a lot of maybe older managers who are maybe not as interested in this sort of thing as the younger ones. Do you foresee that perhaps in 20 years, the generation, obviously having moved forward, there'll be a massive, massive change in football specifically?
I don't actually. With the management there is, and I think Simon's first presentation of the day made that very clear, that some of the traditional old managers finding they're not getting jobs anymore, and young guys that don't necessarily have a very successful playing background are. I think with the players, I think it's such a different environment now. I mean, they really are, Premier League players paid so much money, and we know money is a very powerful motivator, but it's not a very high quality motivator. And I don't think it guarantees that you get good buy-in from all players, no matter what the age. But I think that really has to come from the coach. I really do think it's all about the coaching.
If I may, as the old bugger on the panel, I think you've got to be really careful about stereotyping. We wrote a paper which we had the devil's own job getting published. It's out there now, and it's on vampires and wolves, subspecies in British coaches. Yeah, and it's almost like, depending on their conception of knowledge, you've got people who are vampires who are just, I'm superior being, I know everything, and I don't need to work with your people. Yeah, as opposed to wolves who are very acquisitive and chase around trying to, I'll steal that, I'll use that, I'll use that, I'll use that, and that is not an age split. That's a characteristic of actually how people view learning and knowledge. And what you want, now that doesn't mean that the wolves are better coaches than the vampires, yeah, because the vampires are immensely impressive, charismatic characters. And so some of the most successful coaches I had, yeah, and I've worked with, have been completely, anal arseholes, sorry, in terms of their willingness to listen and learn from new stuff. But you want actually to get mentored by young coaches with wolves, because they're now looking at that, looking at that, looking at that. And I would just commend that to you as an idea. And it's a personality characteristic, and I think this comes back to your stuff, mate, in terms of evaluating it, that is down to how you view knowledge. If you view knowledge as, why is that true? Well, because I'm an expert and I told you, then you'll be a vampire. If you view, well, that's true because I've thought about it and I've tested it and I've asked his opinion and la-da-da, then you'll be a wolf. And that's a bit simplistic, but it makes the point, I hope.
I just want to chime in that going off
Chime
of
away.
going off what he was saying about the relationship of age and whether or not a manager is going to be open to this change. I recommend this to someone last night, and they'd already read the book, but there's a book called The Extra 2%, which features the Tampa Bay Rays, which is a Major League Baseball club. So that's a very good book that just kind of speaks about analytics and how they had a lot of Wall Street guys that took over that. It was a struggling franchise, and right away turning around, how those dramatic turnarounds in all of baseball, and it's now a very competitive team. But the point is that their manager is older, and you would think that just by the trend that he would be of the traditional baseball mindset, but he was the perfect guy because he was he was very open to change. He was very creative, and his experience just made him even a stronger candidate to embrace the kind of change and implement it correctly. So that was one anecdotal case where age didn't matter. You had a more veteran manager who kind of took on the analytics mindset, and that example with the Tampa Bay Rays is really good one. And someone argued that they were even better than the Oakland A's, in baseball, with how they were able to implement analytics.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Thank you to all our speakers today. Thank you very much for coming. All that's left for me to do is hand over to our director of our event today, and also the director of the sports office, the same person, Mr. Phil Clark.
Thank you, Rebecca. Big thanks really first to all the speakers out. It's been a diverse day's event, but each different presentation has been stimulating, very interesting to myself and the other delegates that I've spoken to today. So thank you very much to all the speakers for their contributions. Thanks again to our partners for the event, Manchester Business School here who helped to host and facilitate the art surgery and replay analysis. I must also show my appreciation to the guys who hosted the workshops and those who took part in those. One of the aims of this conference today is to bring people together so we can share ideas, challenge one another, and then shape and direct this event in the future. So we will be feeding back from everything that you've contributed there today. So again, thank you very much. And I think the big thing that came out of it for me, and some of this saying about big data, well, how can big data make a big difference to your team or your players? And I think that we've all got away here from today with some fresh ideas to stimulate that process back in our organisation. Thank you very much, and I'll hope to see you again today.